About 90 games after covering the first Ninja Gaiden, I'm back for more with Ninja Gaiden 2: The Dark Sword of Chaos. This is a game I have never touched before and know little about because people only seem to talk about the first game of the classic series. The game's opening cutscene picks up right after the end of the first game. This mysterious figure is being informed of Jakio's death at the hands of Ryu Hayabusa. He confirms that Hayabusa does not know of him yet and tells his henchmen to continue his plan. When asked what shall be done with Hayabusa, the figure says nothing, as there is no further need to involve him yet. He says that when the Gate of Darkness opens, all mankind will kneel before him, Ashtar. A year passes from that moment. On starting the game, we're thrown right into Act 1, running through the city, crossing rooftops. Ryu maintains his movement options from the first game, run, jump, slash and wall jump, but he also gained the ability to climb walls. Items can still be found by striking orbs. In terms of enemies, we've got annoying bats moving in wavy patterns, these hunchback guys and dudes with swords. I pick up some different sub-weapons on this first screen. The Shuriken, Dragon Ball and Fire Wheel return from the first game. As I keep moving forward, I get ninjas jumping up from the bottom of the screen to throw their own Shurikens at me. There's also an item that creates a shadow clone of Ryu that hangs behind him and mimics all his movements. Thing is, a lot of his time on screen didn't show up in the recording due to the way it flickers in game, so if you see the odd flash of an orange Ryu at points, that's why. I reach the end of the screen and climb down the ladder to the next, and then once again to reach the streets below. I just run to the right, taking out more of the same enemies until I go through the door at the end. It leads into the train station where I face the first boss, Dando. He mainly inches forward a little before charging to the other side of the screen, but it's hard to tell what's going on as Ryu and the Shadow Clone keep taking turns existing on screen, but the important part is that I die. This boss is actually really easy. I just have to keep a slight distance while slashing and jump over his charge. Even if it hits me with it, I still have enough health to outlast him if I keep slashing. While Ryu wonders who these guys even are, a guy comes out of the shadows to tell him he should go to the Tower of Larja if he wants to save the girl. Ryu didn't even know that Irene had been kidnapped. Ryu asks who the man is, but he instead pulls out a gun and shoots. But he was actually shooting a demon approaching Ryu from behind. Ryu asks who he is again, but he's disappeared while telling Ryu to hurry his ass up. This leads into Act 2, where I'm fighting my way across the top of many train carriages. I get guys with hockey masks and machetes and the return of those eagles that gave me so much trouble in the first game. As I keep going, I regain the Shadow Clone. Apologies if this makes anyone feel ill, by the way. It tends to only appear when Ryu is blinking from being hit, and for some reason watching it back makes me feel a little sick. Apart from that, there isn't much to say about this stage. It may be the simplest so far between both games. Once I reach the front of the train, we move on to 2-2, the actual larger mountains. Now this part adds some complexity. There are strong winds here, indicated by the direction the snow is falling. Straight down is normal, and running against the wind slows me down and pushes me back, while running with the wind speeds me up and pushes me forward. Many jumps here require me to be jumping with the wind pushing me forward. Trying it with no wind results in a death. After I cross the first two jumps properly, I get a dude throwing infinite boulders at me. He's fine, but the second causes me some trouble when the wind keeps flinging me into him. As I move forward, I also get my first slime enemy clinging to the wall and make first use of my boomerang shuriken. I get another wind caused death when I jump on a platform and the wind just nudges me off the edge. This is my first game over, but continues are infinite and very generous, so the game just starts me off at this stage. I get back next time and climb the walls to reach the next screen. Another wind-aided jump and I've got to climb some stairs while a guy with a gun shoots at me and another demon above me spin dashes down towards me. I end up back outside, fight through some more enemies, and then jump a few gaps to reach the ladder to the next screen. I get these sort of lizard men and guys holding out swords who just sprint right through me. I go through the little tunnel and try to climb the ladder at the end for an eagle to knock me into a pit. I get my revenge and climb the ladder once again, leading to the boss, Baron Spider. He hangs out on a platform above me and throws out 4 spiders. 2 fly off the screen and the other 2 stay. The remaining spiders can climb up the only wall here, which I need to climb too so I can jump to him and get a few hits in. He'll then jump down, jump back up and start again. It's so easy to get impatient and start climbing too early, getting a spider thrown in your face. Or even jump too far and land into him, since the winds are still constantly changing up here too. There's just a lot to keep track of. I think for a first try I was doing well until I took a bit too much damage, got flustered and started trying too hard, getting hit even quicker. I got him to his last quarter of health, but he killed me first. Next try goes a little bit worse, I hit him one less time. But on my last life, the wind blows me into his left side and he teams up with it to send me flying into the pit, so I have to restart the stage. I make it back with 2 lives, less than half health and a Shadow Clone. I first use up all my points to hang on the wall throwing boomerangs at him. Those moments where he jumps down are helped a lot by the clone though, as I deal damage much quicker. Doesn't stop me getting killed though. Next time I get quite a lot of early damage, somehow baiting him to jump down where I can hit him a few times. He still gets his usual hits on me, but the head start lets me kill him. That was quite an exhilarating stage actually. Boss was a pain, but the actual win mechanic is quite fun when things are going your way. Ryu questions the Baron on who he is. He says they are tribesmen from the world of Chaos. Their leader is the Emperor of Darkness, Ashtar. That's about it before Act 3 starts. Ryu says he must save Irene as he stares down the Tower of Larger from the top of the mountain. I praised the last stage for its mechanic, but I hated this one. The floor is only briefly visible, only when lightning strikes for a split second. This means constant stopping and starting, as you can easily fall in a pit you can't see. Or you could jump too early and end up clinging against a wall next to a pit, which is usually a death sentence as you can't jump back up. I only do thanks to a fireball hitting me and bouncing me back up. Those fireballs are massive ball aches too, especially when I get two and one gets waiting ahead of time in the spot I'll be when I stop blinking from damage. It gets me my first death from a regular enemy. Next time I slip into a pit because I couldn't see where the floor ends, and then once again a strict pit combined with the wall cling gets me. Next time I get back to where I died and use the invincible fire wheel to take out those enemies, but it turns out I can't get any further from there. I have to go back a bit, drop down onto a lower floor and get jumping across. But the dark screen stopping me seeing what's in front of it has me waiting for lightning, jumping to avoid a respawn limes projectile, landing back above and having to do it again. But I get stuck on a pit wall again. But next time I make it across. And notice that my shadow clone has now decided to join us on screen for the rest of these recordings. The game gets incredibly cruel and has me jumping across very thin platforms where clinging to the side is a death sentence and there's an arsehole bat hanging around. Then I fall in only the second pit. It's a few minutes before I get back and discover that pausing the game does not pause the lightning, so if I'm unsure I can just pause to work out what's in front of me. I panic when I cling to the last platform, but it's on the right side and I'm high enough to cross the pit here. After that it's pretty simple until I reach the door into the tower at the end going into 3-2. Glad that's over with. But right away I get quite the annoying enemy, who zooms about jumping above me throwing a million kunai down at me. I kill him and he respawns, so I try ignoring him and moving on, but he follows me, getting me killed by another new guy throwing sickles. Next time I post damage invincibility my way through them and just rush for the ladder to the next screen. I don't last long as I end up between two of those spin dashing guys and finished off. Next time I make the first room easier by nudging the sickle guy off the platform with a shuriken. I lose a lot of health on the next screen being juggled between a bat and the three demons there. I make it past them and jump a pit only for the guy with the gun to shoot me into it. But next time I Dragon Ball the demons and am aware of the gunman, so I can deal with it and climb to the next screen. But then Ryu doesn't cling to the wall when I jump for some reason and dies. I'm then jumping across what looks like a load of coffins while dealing with giant spiders and eagles. It looks like I've reached the end, but an eagle knocks me into a pit. Next time I get a batter in, but with just one unit of health left I make it to the end and climb to the next screen. This time I can't dodge the first eagle, and then the first enemy swats me into the pit, and the eagle knocks me forward into the pit instead. All lives to game over in about 15 seconds. It takes me 2 more game overs before I finally make it back. It's more of the same platforms from the previous screen and I just barely make it to the end so I can climb to the next. Up here is a guy with a shield throwing a fiery boomerang. He takes a few hits to kill. Then there's these skeletons while being spammed with machete men. I reach the wall, climb up and have to follow along the opposite direction to deal with more of them before I can climb up to the boss, Funky Dynamite. That's not a localization thing, that's his name in Japanese too. He hovers above me, moving left and right and shooting diagonal fireballs. Hitting in the air gets me killed when he drops down and hits my last bit of health away. When he drops, he also sends out a few bombs to avoid. I get a few hits on him at first as my shadow clone is slightly above me and knocks him down again on his way back up. It's just very hard to actually get up there and hit him with a fireball hitting me or him flying into me. So I only take half of his health before I die again. But next time I get very lucky and trap him in a good spot where he keeps jumping into my sword swings and falling, letting me quickly kill him. Ryu is reunited with Irene, but then Ashtar turns up. He stuns Ryu using his sword and says that it's hard to believe he's the one who defeated Jaquio. He goes for the kill, but is shot in the back by the same guy we met at the end of the first stage. He tells Ashtar that he has the tower surrounded and to hand over his sword. He says we'll have to follow him into the maze of darkness if we want the sword, and then disappears with Irene. This leads into Act 4. Ryu asks what the sword is and is told that it's the Sword of Chaos, grown from the bone of a demon, in the same way Ryu's dragon sword was from a dragon's fang. The man finally introduces himself as Robert. He's from the US Army Special Intelligence. He says Ashtar has to be stopped before his sword reaches full strength. In here we have these hopping eyeball things and fireballs coming from the pits. I get knocked into the first one and die, but I only had one life left anyway, so it's fine. Next time I discover it's one of the few pits small enough that clinging to the inside is escapable. In fact, this level in general seems a bit more forgiving than the last. I can drop on an enemy, bounce into a pit and still barely survive there. After that it's more pits with irritating bats before I reach the ladder to the next screen. Second screen is a single fireball following me up the wall until I can jump across to the ladder to the third screen. The third screen has some stricter jumps, but it's an enemy hanging out on the edge below that kills me when I land on him and bounce into the fire. And next time I clearly land on the first platform before falling through it to my death. I tried to wait on the last platform before jumping, but then I get two fireballs coming at me from above, so I have no choice and die again. I make it back with one life and just barely land in the tiniest space available to me, but then the fireballs from a nearby pit knock me back in anyway. Next time I manage to inch a bit forward to stop them jumping out. I have to jump across these thin pillars, and that's while dealing with the odd eagle and constant fireball enemies spawning behind me. But this is one of the easiest segments and I reach the ladder leading into 4-2. This one has all this running water that, like the wind in 2-2, slows me or speeds me up depending on whether I'm running with or against it. I get through the first bit simple enough, but then lose a lot of health getting stuck repeatedly on this tiny bit of wall. It's here I really start to use the boomerang shuriken a lot. A bit further is a ladder going down. Now here's where the maze part comes in. Running along the bottom of the screen until I can climb up the middle section. Running back the way I came, and once I reach the tiny platforms, an eagle knocks me to my death. Next time I'm ready for it, I can get on the top row. I actually make it to the end but suffer some severe brain rot when I drop back down to the middle to pick up an item. Good thing I make it back so I can climb down to the next screen or I'd never forgive myself. First there's a long run with some water, then this dickhead hunchback follows me along these platforms and smacks me into the pit. Of course next time he dies right away, he was just making sure to rob me of my power-ups. Ignore the platforms going back left, they're a waste of health. I have to run with a small bit of water to jump the next pit, and then after that is a few more platforms and more water flows until I reach the door to the boss, Naga Sotuva. It's a big mouth spewing water with hands that slap across the only places where I can safely hit him from. I do well at first, climbing up and getting 5 quick hits in, but then I get impatient again and throw myself into him trying to hit him. Then a hand finishes me off. It takes me 10 minutes to get back. By the way, can anyone explain to me why the left platform seems so impossible to land on when both walls are the same height? I just can't do it. Also, I fail to grab the wall and land in the pit. 4 minutes later, I'm back and do better. I get him down to just 5 units of health, but I'm just a bit too close and get a fatal ass slapping. Next time I get back, I hang in the corner where I start and throw all the boomerang shurikens I can for a head start. With that, I just need to hit him 6 times normally. Much easier. Ryu ponders out loud what Ashtar even wants from him. Ashtar tells him to hurry up and get there so they can fight. Irene has no faith in her boyfriend and tells Ryu they'll kill him. Ryu tries goading Ashtar into coming down here himself and fighting, but it doesn't work. Act 5. A cool touch is that this level starts in the remains of the boss arena, but with its effects gone, now it's dead. I get knocked into a pit in 3 seconds. Even when I move a little bit further and climb over the first wall, the same enemy type is knocking me off screen. A couple jumps later and I'm climbing down to the second screen where we get the actual design and music of the level. There's a lot of spikes around and I don't even know what these things crawling on the ground are. But after I climb over this fire, I have a dickhead sickle thrower in a space where I mostly can't jump to avoid it. That's followed by crossing platforms above fire and then jumping between 2 spiked walls to reach the next screen. But then the first sickle thrower here kills me as I'm trying to climb to him to get over the fire. I get back a few minutes later and it turns out I can just jump between them. I then just brute force my way to the end of the screen and go through the door. While Ryu runs, Ashtar recites a legend about releasing darkness, receiving the power of almighty evil, and demons overrunning the earth. 5-2 now and we're back outside and running on ice. At first I think I'm on a roll, doing really well, then I'm reminded that I started the stage with such low health and get killed in just 2 hits. Even on my next try, I find the enemy placement has been made much less dickish than in the last couple levels. Eventually I end up inside this cave where there are smaller platforms and the ice physics do make me slip off to my death. But when I get back, I'm prepared and quickly jump my way to the ladder and climb down to the next screen, which is just another quick climb down. There's a very narrow jump from the wall to the next platform and I get a lot of guys running with swords, always knocking me back far enough for another to spawn in. I get using the fire wheel a lot more here as I climb this wall and end up jumping across all these platforms a hit from death, but I make it through the door at the end. Ashtar appears and looks like he's handing over Irene, but instead he stabs her in the back. She's supposed to be collapsing, but it just looks like she's going down on him. Robert shows up, the shock of seeing Irene distracts him enough for Ashtar to stun him. Ryu has Robert watch Irene while Ashtar notices inner power is beginning to awaken. They throw out some more trash talk and the battle begins. I have 1 unit of health left, so of course I don't last. Dying against bosses gets more painful as the game goes on, as you're restarted at the beginning of the last room before it, and those are always getting harder, meaning returning to the boss with less and less health as the game goes on. But I get there with most of my health next time. Ashtar disappears and 8 fireballs reform in one location to make him reappear, before he then sends another 8 out. I somehow take out over half his health before I die despite not knowing how to even approach him. Next time I get back, I just stay away from him and spam the fire wheel, giving me time for the fireballs to spread so I can avoid them. Once I run out, I'm so far ahead in health I can just tank his hits and brute force him to death. He's killed, but he manages to send the Sword of Chaos away first. Act 6. Irene tells Ryu that there's an altar up ahead that he has to destroy. He says he can't leave her, but she then says that he's the only one who can do it. He tells Robert to get Irene out of there. Now I'm in a big cave with parts of the scenery in the front hiding enemies. First screen is straightforward, and at the end I drop down a hole to a screen where I drop down another hole. On the third screen I get this kind of snake thing spitting fireballs at me. The rest of this screen is pretty simple, with most of my damage being enemies zooming in from off screen or from behind the scenery. But I managed to make it to the end of the screen. Ryu, while clinging to a cliff, spots the path to a huge tower in the distance. Meanwhile, Irene is exhausted, from the stabbing, but refuses to stop and rest. But they happen upon a familiar face. But back to Ryu with 6-2. Once again I die in seconds due to finishing the last stage with no health. This stage is actually the simplest one in a while, very little platforming to do, mainly just heading right and taking out enemies. Some of them can be dicks, but it's very straightforward until I reach the entrance at the end. In here we meet a familiar boss. It's Kelberos, Jaquio's dog and the Act 4 boss from the first game. They hop around spitting pink shit everywhere while I spam the boomerang until I run out. I get to very little health, but like the other bosses, of course I fail first try. I try the same thing next time and it works even worse. Since 6-2 was entirely one screen, it does mean I always have to do the entire thing to get a second go. When I finally get it, it's just because I rock up with the fire wheel and the shadow clone and just spam them to death. Ryu also recognises that he's fought Kelberos before. Suddenly an injured Robert shows up, saying that Irene was taken. Act 7, the final act. Robert reminds Ryu of the consequences of the Gate of Darkness opening, but Ryu hears more demons approaching. Robert decides to stay behind and hold them back. After trying to talk him down, Ryu wishes him luck and gets going while Robert gets ready to take on the demons. Although Jungle Rat Rob doesn't quite sound as threatening as he thinks it does. So Act 7 is very tough. I spent the same amount of time dying and replaying this act that I did the entire rest of the game up to this point. At first it seems like any other stage, but then it becomes a massive shithead once I realise there's green eagles the same colour as this green waterfall behind me and they blend in. Then I get enemies from 2 sides and pushed into a pit. And then that same eagle next time, flying over the entire platform in the middle of my jump so there's nothing I can do. Then I die the same way as the first time. Next time I get the perfect timing to take both of them out at once and I can safely reach the next screen. 4 fireballs approach me from each corner of the screen, but they're easy to avoid and I continue to the next. Once again, while taking out an enemy, an eagle swats me into the pit. After getting past it, just ignore everything above me until I reach this pillar with an enemy on it. I mess up my wall cling here and die again. Next time I get it, but lose almost all health trying to clear out the enemy on top so I can cross, only for another one to show up and finish me. Takes me a couple more game overs just to get past it and I still die a couple steps later. But after a couple more tries I make it and climb the platforms to reach the next screen. The fireballs are back and this time I fail to dodge them and get killed for another game over. I get back on my first life, avoid the fireballs and climb to another screen. I get moving right for a team up of Eagle and Kunai men to end me. Next time I just outlast everything as it's a short distance to the end of this stage. It looks like Robert is finished. He's bleeding black currant from the mouth and saying everything's going dark. Meanwhile I'm in 7-2, where it's more of the same enemies and the fireballs coming from the pits that can hit me from miles away and drag me in. Think you get free of the enemies, but there's always the one projectile that follows you and manages to catch you. This screen has a lot of climbing the sides of platforms or the pits with bats looking to nudge you off it. That's why it's best to just hang around at the top to avoid as much climbing as possible. Just jump through the enemy and climb the ladder to the next screen. Here I just jump on the wall and back onto the next ladder, but can't even get that right. Such a simple task it takes 2 attempts to make it onto the 3rd screen. At first I do well, going through or easily getting past enemies, but when I need to drop from a wall to the ground underneath, those flying enemies do their best to foil it, and when I actually land it next time, I get shot back out and into the pit. Next time I get back, I manage it once again. Then comes the pillars that landing on spawns 3 eagles at once that I just can't keep track of, and then another that constantly respawns every time the guy with the gun knocks me back. But I make it up to the next screen where it looks like I can outrun the fireballs to the next one, but they catch me at the last second. I get through next time, and then for the last screen I once again brute force through everything to reach that exit. Irene's here, but she warns Ryu that Jaquio is here. He says he was revived by Ryu's battle with Ashtar, saying Ashtar was just a pawn. The Sword of Chaos drains the user's life force, which is what fueled the revival. Once the sword drains enough life force, it can then open the Gate of Darkness. He intends to use Irene's life as the final piece to fully fuel the sword and open the gate. Ryu is fed up with his speeches and Jaquio tells him to bring it. Jaquio flies around dropping many of the fireball enemies at once. I try my best to avoid him in the fight, but I only get 3 hits in before he kills me. And that was game over, so I'm repeating all of 7-2 again. It takes me another 12 minutes to make it back, but at least it doesn't send me several levels back like the first game did. I get my head kicked in at first and then left a hit from death, but then I end up in this pattern of climbing a wall, jumping off to avoid the fireballs and slashing in place so that my shadow clone keeps hitting Jaquio. And somehow I don't take a single more hit and take him out. Ryu checks on Irene, not noticing Jaquio's blood approaching the Sword of Chaos. Irene reminds Ryu that the altar needs to be destroyed, but the blood reaches the sword and awakens it. It catches Irene and drains her life. The Gate of Darkness is opened and Jaquio is revived. He mutates and takes on the form of a giant skull in a wall. Since I was weakened from the first fight, I don't last long. Thing is, when you die here, you have to restart all of 7-2, not just the last screen. A pain, but still nowhere near as bad as what the first game pulled. It still takes another 20 minutes to make it back though. I have to avoid both the fireballs he spits down and the drops from the ceiling while still being close enough to cut his face. I just barely do it, but I'm still not sure how. Like, I had the video I'm looking at now seeing myself do it and I still don't know how I pulled it off. Ryu questions if this is finally the end, but of course that guarantees it isn't. Ryu wonders how he can even defeat something like this, but then his sword begins to glow and he asks it and his father to lend their strength. Once again I die right away, but at least the game keeps which phase of the boss I'm at still. Another 11 minutes to get back. This time I have to hit the skull while it spits out projectiles and there's this hand moving back and forth that I have to avoid. A few hits and shurikens blows up the skull, allowing me to attack the heart. It gets spewing out loads of this purple stuff, but I just avoid most of it and me and my shadow clone tear through its health. Like the first game, the third phase of the final boss is the easiest. The Sword of Chaos is destroyed and the Gate of Darkness is closed. Jaquio is also dead for good this time. The entire tower also collapses. It goes on for a while too, like a minute and a half. But Ryu escapes and cradles Irene's body on top of the mountain. He's pretty upset about it, saying nothing else matters anymore. But the Dragon Sword glows and somehow returns Irene's life force to her. I assume the battle with Jaquio did it in the same way the battle with Ashtar revived him. She's a bit confused, but Ryu tells her everything's fine as it's all over. They then embrace while watching the sunrise and appreciate the beauty of their world. No mention of Robert, so I assume he really is dead. So, Ninja Gaiden 2. The way I've written this, it may sound like I hate the game, but I actually had a lot of fun in the same way I did with the first game, where it was frustrating enough to make you want to keep playing and conquer it. I never got fed up. In fact, I'll even say I enjoyed it more than the first game. Act 3 was a pain, as was Act 7, but the other 5 acts gave me more enjoyment than the first did. I was surprised because I never hear anyone talking about this one, only the first, not even to compare it to the first. It also makes me wonder how the third game, which I somehow managed to hear even less of, fares.